In Sunday school, they hand you a book and call it complete. But the Bible wasn't born whole. It was assembled piece by piece over 400 years. And for every text that made the cut, another was thrown out. Some of these rejected books were read in churches for generations before bishops decided they were dangerous. Others told a different story about Jesus, Mary, or the disciples. The councils met, the votes happened, and the losers disappeared. Subscribe to our channel and keep watching. I'm going to walk through 12 books that were erased and why they threatened those in charge. The Book of Enoch was one of the most popular texts in early Christianity. Written around 300 BC, it described fallen angels called the Watchers who came to earth, married human women, and produced giants called the Nephilim. The corruption that followed brought the flood. Early church fathers quoted it as scripture. The New Testament letter of Jude references it directly. But by the 4th century, councils decided it didn't belong. The book gave too much detail about angels and demons, things the church wanted to control. Copies disappeared from Europe. For over 1,000 years, scholars thought it was lost. Then missionaries found complete manuscripts in Ethiopia, where it remained scripture. The church said no. Ethiopia kept reading. The Gospel of Thomas surfaced in 1945 near Nag Hammadi, Egypt. A farmer digging for fertilizer found a sealed clay jar containing 13 leather-bound books. Inside was a collection of 114 sayings attributed to Jesus, with no narrative, no miracles, no crucifixion. Just words. Some matched verses in Matthew and Luke. Others were strange. Split a piece of wood, and I am there. Lift up a stone, and you will find me. Early bishops called it Gnostic, meaning it promised secret knowledge available only to a few. That threatened the church's role as gatekeeper. The Council of Nicaea in 325 AD didn't include it. Copies were buried. The ones that survived stayed hidden for 16 centuries. The Shepherd of Hermas was a Christian bestseller in the 2nd century. Written in Rome around 140 AD, it described visions given to a former slave named Hermas. Angels appeared. A tower represented the church being built brick by brick. Early congregations read it alongside Paul's letters during Sunday gatherings. Some church fathers considered it scripture. Then opinions shifted. By the 4th century, bishops decided it was useful for teaching, but not divinely inspired. The Council of Carthage in 397 AD left it off the final list. The book faded. Manuscripts stopped being copied. What had once been read in churches across the Roman Empire became a footnote, mentioned only in scholarly debates about what almost made the cut. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene didn't surface until 1896, when a German scholar bought a 5th century manuscript in Cairo. The text was fragmentary. Pages were missing, but what remained was explosive. In this Gospel, Mary receives private teachings from Jesus after the resurrection. She shares them with the other disciples. Peter gets angry. He asks why Jesus would speak to a woman privately rather than to the men. Another disciple defends her. The conflict is clear. Some early Christians believed Mary held spiritual authority equal to any apostle. The church that survived chose Peter's side. Records from the era show heated debates about women in leadership. This gospel lost. The winner wrote the rules. The Gospel of Judas turned the entire betrayal story upside down. In this text, discovered in the 1970s and finally translated in 2006, Judas isn't the villain. He's the only disciple who truly understands Jesus. The betrayal is a divine favor. Jesus asks Judas to hand him over so he can escape his physical body and return to the divine realm. The other disciples are blind to this truth. They worship a lesser god. Judas alone sees clearly. Early church fathers knew about this gospel and condemned it as dangerous heresy. Records show it circulating among Gnostic communities in the 2nd century. The official church buried it. The idea that Judas was a hero couldn't survive. The infancy Gospel of Thomas describes Jesus as a child, and the portrait is disturbing. In this 2nd century text, the young Jesus has miraculous powers but no patience. When a boy accidentally bumps into him, Jesus curses him and the child drops dead. When a teacher tries to discipline him, Jesus strikes him blind. The other children are terrified. Joseph pleads with his son to stop. Eventually, the boy learns compassion, healing those he harmed. But the damage was done. Church authorities found this version of Jesus too dangerous. It made him look cruel, unpredictable, almost demonic. Copies circulated anyway, passed hand to hand among the faithful. The church banned it. Parents kept telling the stories. The Book of Jubilees retells Genesis with one major addition: an elaborate calendar of angel activity. Written around 150 BC, it divides history into periods of 49 years and assigns angels to govern natural phenomena, seasons, and human affairs. The level of detail made church authorities nervous. It suggested a cosmic bureaucracy operating alongside God, one that ordinary believers could study and understand without priestly mediation. The Council of Laodicea in 364 AD rejected it from the canon. Copies vanished from Western churches within a generation. But in Ethiopia, the book remained sacred. Monks preserved it in Ge'ez, their ancient liturgical language, copying it by hand for centuries. What was forbidden in Rome stayed scripture in Addis Ababa. The line between holy and heretical was always a matter of geography. The Apocalypse of Peter gave early Christians their first detailed tour of hell. Written in the 2nd century, this text described punishments matched to sins with disturbing precision. Blasphemers hung by their tongues over flames. Adulterers were suspended by their hair over boiling mud. Murderers faced pits filled with venomous creatures that devoured them without end. The imagery was graphic, specific, and terrifying. Early church leaders read it in some congregations as scripture during worship services. By the 4th century, it was dropped from the canon, too disturbing, too focused on punishment rather than redemption. But the visions never disappeared from Christian imagination. Scholars trace a direct line from this text to Dante's Inferno 800 years later. The church said no. The nightmares lived on. The Watcher section of 1 Enoch became the origin story for demons in Christian imagination. In these chapters, 200 angels descend to Mount Hermon, take human wives, and teach forbidden knowledge, metalworking, cosmetics, weapons, sorcery. Their offspring, the Nephilim, devour resources, then humans, then each other. God sends the flood to cleanse the corruption, but the spirits of the dead giants remain on earth as demons, tormenting humanity until the final judgment. This mythology shapes centuries of Christian demonology. Exorcism rituals, medieval treatises on demons, and modern horror films all carry its fingerprints. The official church rejected it. The ideas proved harder to kill. The Wisdom of Solomon sits in a strange place. Catholics and Orthodox Christians consider it scripture today. Protestants call it apocrypha, useful for reading but not divine revelation. Written around 50 BC in Alexandria, it blends Jewish tradition with Greek philosophy in ways that influenced early Christian theology deeply. The text speaks of immortality, divine wisdom personified as a woman, and the just suffering of the righteous. Martin Luther removed it from the Protestant Old Testament during the Reformation, calling it helpful but not authoritative. The split remains to this day. The same book is sacred in one church and secondary reading in another. Canon was never universal. It still isn't. 2nd Esdras, also called 4th Ezra, contained apocalyptic visions that early Christians found both compelling and troubling. Written around 100 AD, it described the end times, the coming of the Messiah, and the fate of souls after death in vivid detail. The author asked why God allows evil to flourish while the righteous suffer. The answers were cryptic but influential. Scholars see its fingerprints on the Book of Revelation, which made the official cut. 2nd Esdras did not. It was too Jewish, some councils said, too speculative. It survived in Latin manuscripts, hidden in monastery libraries, pulled out occasionally when someone wanted to know what almost became sacred. The Gospel of Philip contains the passage that launched 1,000 conspiracy theories. In this 3rd century Gnostic text, Jesus is described as loving Mary Magdalene more than the other disciples. The word companion appears in a damaged section of the manuscript. Some translations suggest consort. There's a reference to kissing. The text is fragmentary, the meaning disputed by scholars even today. But when translations became available in the 20th century, the speculation exploded. Were Jesus and Mary married? Did they have children? Church authorities had always dismissed the text as dangerous heresy. The attention proved their point. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again. And that says a lot about why certain books were buried in the first place.